Hi everyone, it's amazing to see you, so many beautiful faces. I'm here today because, just like you, I love typography and type design. And sometimes when I'm at a restaurant with my friends and menu is set in a beautiful or interesting typeface, my friends have to actually remind me that letters are meant to be read, not only looked at. In other words, that I should stop staring at fonts and order some food. In fact, working with fonts is what I do for a living. I came to Berlin to work as a font engineer at Monotype. Yes, you heard me right, a font engineer. So, as my grandpa said, ooh, so not a real engineer. And, which is even worse to say here in my day job, I'm not exactly a type designer either. And I think that it's already generally well known that the type designer is someone who spends a fair amount of time kerning, spacing, supporting users with open type features, and when there is a time left, designing letter forms and other characters. But what about a font engineer? Do you like music? I know I do. So, in the music industry, when a band is working on a song, usually after quite some preparations, they go to the recording studio, they record the song, but the song is not quite yet finished in the moment when they leave the studio. There is usually a lot of work which has to be done after the song was recorded to make it sound as best as it can. This process is called mastering. The same applies to fonts and type design. After type designers is done with the design of the typeface, there is still quite a lot of work left to make sure that the font looks and works perfectly in print and in all digital environment. It is called font mastering, and this is what a font engineer like me does. Recently, I specialized in variable fonts, which takes us to today's topic. Variable fonts. So now I'd like to ask you some questions to get to know you a little bit better. Okay. How many of you know what a variable font is? Raise your hand. Okay, quite a lot of you. Great. How many of you visited our variable font booth? I had to be there. Who of you is like, variable font? What is that? Sometimes me, yeah. Okay. So, a little bit of history. On 14th of September 2016, I was sitting in a conference room in Warsaw, Poland, when something remarkable happened. 4 representatives from 4 tech industry leaders, Microsoft, Apple, Google, and Adobe, went on stage together to talk about a collaboration and a major update to the OpenType font standard. There was a time in the early 90s, and some of you might remember that, not me, I was too busy mastering the art of walking at the time. There was a moment in history of the type technology so competitive that it is referred to as the font wars. And by that time, I've learned already about it, and simply by seeing that collaboration, I was amazed. It is something that I think illustrates our times of collaboration. But then it was even better, because OpenType 1.8 introduced variable fonts, which I'm a little bit obsessed with. A variable font is a font family in one file with a flexible range. So let's now have a closer look on how a variable font is built. Do you remember a legend about Hydra? It's this creature from mythology that had one body but many heads, and it was able to grow new heads. So I have my own version of this story. Let's consider this dragon, and let's give it a name, Helvetica Regular. Let's add another one, Helvetica Bleak, and another one. And now we have a happy Helvetica dragon family. So just like Hydra, a variable font has a common body, but can contain many, many styles and is able to generate styles in between. I think that it's pretty magical. So how does it work? First, we need very well-crafted masters. Masters are most often extreme designs. In this case, a light and a heavy font weights. In variable fonts, we can smoothly interpolate between masters and get new font weights on a fly. Because here we have light and heavy masters, we are going to interpolate along a weight axis. One way of explaining what an axis are is that there are numerical ranges to which a certain change is assigned. For example, we can imagine a font with weight axis from 300 to 900, where 300 is the lightest and 900 is the heaviest. The trick is to have the same amount of control points in correct positions in all glyphs in the font, like in this letter A here. When I overlap them, we can see an array of interpolation for this letter. If you're a type designer, you probably know very well the multiple master technology. This is something similar, if not exactly the same. Here you can see the variable font in action. Now, if we have two axes, this is a simplified diagram showing how it works. So, again, we have masters. This is how interpolation can look on a weight axis. This is what happens when we add a width axis. And you can also get anything in between. Regular would be somewhere here. Now, when we at Monotype work with previously existing and popular families, this is what we do. We carefully analyze what's available, which axes are possible to build, and if any changes have to be made in design. We select and craft master candidates. Then we use quite a bunch of different tools, which leaves us with beautiful variable font, ideally containing all originally available styles and weights. So, sounds easy, right? What can go wrong? See here? In this O tilde, two paths had the same amount of points, but across masters they were incorrectly assigned to each other, which creates this crazy but how pleasant to look Frankenstein. In case of this T-bar, we had again the same amount of points, but the relationship between masters is wrong, between points is wrong, which creates this very delightful kink. Let me show you another one, a very common one. And I have a whole collection, but I'm not going to show you all of them. Sometimes interpolation errors are a little harder to spot. Okay, now, who can tell me where is the problem here? You can shout. Anyone? Somewhere around there. And now? It's here. The first one is wrong and the second one is correct. There was a little bend. It's quite very unpleasant if you know the typeface very well, and especially if you designed it. Font engineer's job here is not only to make sure that sources are compatible, but that variable fonts interpolates correctly and looks how the type designer intended. And this is part of my job. What's amazing for me is that variable fonts are already supported by Illustrator and Photoshop. So here you can see how you can work with them. Select the text box and in the character menu, choose the variable font from the family list. Below there is a font style list where the named instance can be chosen. And sometimes you'd like to adjust the weight or width of the letters only slightly. Regular is too wide, condensed is too narrow, and you'd like something in between. And, would be awesome. And with variable font is possible. To access that, you have to click this little axis button next to the style list name. Okay. I've had a lot of questions and complaints about the lack of support for variable fonts in InDesign. And I was complaining myself. And now I'm a little tired of it, so here's what we can do. Go on this website, indesign.uservoice.com, search for variable font support, and vote if you like. I already did. Any web designers in the room? Please raise your hands. Okay, we have some. Hi. For the rest of you, please raise your hand if you have ever designed a website. Can be a blog. Okay, a lot of us. Good. Who of you have ever been annoyed by a loading time of a website? Okay. I think it's fair to say that users are extremely sensitive to web performance, which means that today businesses must make sure that their websites work really fast on all the devices. This makes speed one of the most important and crucial elements of web design. Unfortunately, it means that sometimes we need to make some compromises when designing. I'm sure you're well aware of that. And, it limits creative freedom as well as it limits an ability to express an individual voice of a brand. And it shouldn't be like that. For centuries, type was the voice of what we read. I believe that we should be able to use this typographic voice without being worried about the size of a file. Typefaces and typography are a core element of branding, naturally, of an expression of a vocal range. And great typography influences understanding, mood, and meaning in countless ways, and is an essential part of design. Remember Hydra? One of the best advantages of variable font in a context of web, and one a quite obvious one, is that it takes less space. So less files, less kilobytes, and much, much more typographic freedom. So here I have something that when I saw it for the first time, for me it was really like mind-blowing. If we compare static font family and a variable font, turns out that the variable fonts are up to 70% smaller than the family it supports, and this is real data from one of the fonts I worked on. This means that we have the creative freedom, we can enjoy all the styles without worrying about the performance. Because first, we have a general savings of data to download, and second, there are fewer HTTP requests for assets because there are fewer font files. Amazing, right? Less really means more here. I guess maybe I'm more excited because there's a lot of numbers. Who knows? And I'd like to show you an experimental side project of our colleague Bernd Vollmer, font engineer from the Berlin office. This is a microsite that Bernd created for one of his experimental fonts. He was exploring various CSS text effects which can work with variable fonts. Of course, one could use a GIF instead of a variable font for animations, but here text is selectable, one can copy text, place links, and it's easy to edit text content. I also like this microsite for its design. It's nice, playful yet consistent. This is another experimental site, and this one is by Jan Harvat. It's all done again with just one variable font. This font has 3 axes, weight, width, and slant. Now, user can control change by moving cursor to different positions and can click to change axis. In other words, change the category. For example, from weight to width. Here you can see this circle when I click. Here you can see officially a registered axis. Sorry. Those are most common possibilities. Now, how you can work with axes in CSS? CSS4 adds new property to fonts to work with font variations. Font variation settings. weight, width, italic, slant, optical size, and custom. Wait, I haven't told you what is a custom axis. This is my favorite example, worm axis, terminal, and skeleton. I love the cover by David Berlow, really playful font variable experiment. And for optical size and custom axis, it makes total sense to have a new property. But haven't we got already properties for weight, width, italic, and slant? Of course. So here is how you can access different axis settings with the already existing properties. And I recommend you to use those. Now, time for the browser support. Edge and Safari support those new properties already, but Chrome and Firefox need to catch up a little bit. And it is possible to test variable fonts in Firefox, but this needs to be manually enabled. I hope that soon it will be available on default, and that also font optical sizing will be implemented. If you work with Java, I have something for you. So last month at TYPO Labs, we announced JavaScript library, which you can use to access variable font properties. It's open sourced, was published by Bob Taylor, and yeah, it's open source. Now I want to show you a few examples of variable fonts I worked on. And you will see different variation axes and what you can do with it. Optical size. So again, this is how you can implement, how you can use optical size axis in CSS. But wait, optical size is actually a very old idea. Before industrialization, before times when machines took over the production of matrices, every style and font size was produced by hand. Punch cutters had to cut each weight of a typeface separately. This was an extremely laborious and expensive process. That's why an expert engraver would adapt each font size. And optical size adjustments were a side effect of this. Now, type design used to be something very static. After the typeface was designed and cut in a metal or wood, it was very difficult, obviously, to adjust anything. But change is obviously very present in our lives now, sometimes too present. Let's take a scale, for example. One of the most important concepts in design. Nowadays, we change scale very often. This pinch and unpinch gesture we make in order to zoom in and zoom out, it feels already so natural to us. We use different displays, different resolutions, and I think with new technologies, this tendency will increase. However, even if the concept of changing scale is very common, it is not so easy to make fonts scalable in an appropriate way. The concept of an optical size refers to something different than simply increasing or decreasing the size of the letter form itself. It is all about readability and the size of a text. This is an example from hot metal print era, where you can see those size-specific adjustments. It is not only that the typeface looks a bit bolder. Yes, overall weight of a typeface is increased, but also width of the letter gets bigger, the spacing is looser, XI gets larger, stroke contrast is smaller, and apertures are open. On top of that, details are getting simpler. Please have a look at this cue, how the loop disappears and the swashes are getting simple. Okay, let's see if this idea works. I have a question for you. Which of these is the easiest for you to read? Who votes for the first? I'm not gonna give you any clues, don't look at me. Okay. Who votes for the second? Okay, and the third? Okay, perfect. It worked. Yay. You can see that first is a bit bolder, but as I said, it's not everything. These three texts are set in the same point size, but in three different fonts, three different styles. All three styles belong to one family, Clifford, designed by Akira Kobayashi. This is actually one of the relatively rare examples in the digital era, an example of a typeface family which supports the idea of optical sizes. So each single typeface in this family was designed specifically for a different text size. Those three typefaces are Clifford 18 for large text like headlines, Clifford 9 for reading sizes, for example, continuous longer text, and 6 designed especially for small size text. And of course, the size indication is only a recommendation, but I think it's a very good one. Here is an example of a letter A from Clifford Fonts, and you can see the difference. Different optical size, but the same point size. And this typeface is 19 years old, was published here in Berlin by Fontshop back then, and it's a great digital interpretation of this idea that goes back to the hot metal era. You can buy those three fonts, install them and use, but it would be great if we could have all sizes in between, and if we can use them in more convenient, perhaps automatic ways. And since September 2016, it is actually possible because, yeah, you're right, we have variable font format. So here you can see this family, Clifford, made as a prototype variable font. In producing this variable font, the most challenging part was to create point-compatible masters without losing distinctive features of each master. See, Akira Kobayashi, designer of Clifford, designed different versions of certain glyphs. Some characters were changed to function better in intended size. For example, have a look at an ampersand and its decorative swashes. In small size, it's simpler. In bigger, flourishes. And if you pay attention to the loop, you'll see that it's turning into a drop. Ampersand and many characters in this font has two different forms, and it was impossible to make them interpolate, but there is a solution. We decided to use Glyph Substitutions based on axis coordinates. Now, I know it sounds geeky. It's like with the OpenType feature replacement. Consider those three characters. First letter is a basic G, a default one, and then there are some variations with the swash. Now, let's say that we want the font to behave so if a letter G appears at the end of the word, it will be replaced by the G with a swash. Using a simple OpenType code language, we could write a substitution definition, reference to the name of this glyph or its index, and ask our machine to make the replacement if a certain context applies. In variation fonts, our context can be a certain point on an axis. When a value chosen by a user is smaller or bigger than a certain point, then replacement would take place. It is called a glyph substitution based on axis coordinates. It uses a feature variation table in GSUB, glyph substitution table. To do it, we prepared two versions of the glyph in the font, one with one design style and another designed differently. Then we built a feature variation. So now, if a variant is requested for a particular point on an axis, the GSUB table dictates the substitution. In other words, in this case, GSUB table controls a choice of a glyph. Exceeding certain point on an axis triggers the replacement of one version of a certain character to another version of this character. And it can happen automatically. Okay, now we know all about it. As we were working on these fonts, we needed a test environment. That's why we prepared a microsite, our playground, where user can adjust the optical size. I just want to mention that it was at the time when optical axis wasn't supported in CSS, so yeah, I hope we can remake it due to latest standards. On the website, you can read a great article about optical size written by Volker Ronenberger. And we have hidden little interactive surprises for you. You can even get a little goofy with us and make font react to your face expression. So I encourage you to go and check it out yourself. Here is the address. Where you can use a font with optical size, with an optical size axis. In any cases where longer continuous text is present or where the scale changes. And I hope it's going to be supported in all software. You know, I would love to see a PDF with a variable font inside, so where I zoom in or zoom out, the optical size will be automatically adjusted. This project showed me that one of the promises of the variable fonts is high-quality digital typography that takes less effort for the typographer and the designer. A promise of beautiful typefaces, which will do a little bit of job for you. Now, width. Again, those are the settings you can use. You would use font stretch and then choose percentage. Now, let me tell you about Guttenberg. We all know him. But have you ever thought why Guttenberg got so famous? What is Guttenberg known for? Okay, first the obvious one, of course, because of his invention of movable type, which was a profound technological invention and changed everything in Europe. But also because the text he printed were set in such a beautiful way, with text colors so even that it looks like written by the most skilled scribes of his time. What was his secret? So some experts say that whenever his text line was getting too long, he would just cut some more condensed letters. That's why his text looks so natural and amazing. That wasn't possible in the digital era exactly, or it was very hard to implement until now. So if you need a font that's only a little bit more condensed, or you need one line of a text to be adjusted a tiny bit, you can easily do that with variable fonts. I think that ability to make such micro adjustments bring us a little closer to the Guttenberg. And a side note on this, it can work in AR too. We made some tests this year. Here you can see a screen recording from my phone. I'm at the office and I'm testing. I'm touching the sign and I'm adjusting weight and width by swiping my finger on the screen. What is interesting here that I can see immediately the change I make and I can judge it. And when I design, I don't always need to give the end user ability to adjust the typeface. I can make the sign static or make the change automatic. But even though being able as a designer to immediately see the result and make changes directly in the medium I'm working with helps me to make an appropriate design decision, and it makes design process faster. Okay, it should be weight. Sorry for the mistake. Now, something that I'm very excited about. Font Meta. It's a very known and loved typeface. It had a very good reception over the years. One of my favorite stories is that Meta is one of the few typefaces in the MoMA Architecture and Design collection in New York. And I'm sure that all of you know very well the history of its creation. But the important thing I want to stress here is that this clean and very distinctive typeface has proved many times its ability to serve multiple design purposes very well at small and bigger sizes. And this makes Meta a perfect candidate for creating its version in a variable format. And maybe some of you know this already, but at Monotype we worked pretty hard to make it work for this conference especially. And there it is in action. Okay. We prepared 3 fonts. So in case that any of you want to use only italic or only Roman, you can do that. But we also prepared a version which is combining two of them. All three fonts have a weight axis, and the demo set also has an italic axis that is binary. It works 0, 1, on or off. And what is best is that you can try meta variable and use it in your personal and commercial projects. Just please read the EULA. Also, we prepared flyers for you, so there's beautiful designs on a metallic paper you can take with you, and there you have an address of our landing page for Meta. And it was already, Meta can be seen already in quite some places, and I'm very happy that we can see it on Axis Praxis. We just released the fonts a few days ago, so I think it's amazing. Axis Praxis is a great website by Lawrence Penny, and here you can explore a lot of different variable fonts. Here is where you can download the fonts, but this page would also take you to our microsite. More surprises for you. We wanted to give you the possibility to learn more about the variable fonts in context of web design and show you the font in action. So we reached out to Jason Pamental. He wrote for us a beautiful article and designed a website on CodePen where you can get access to the entire sample HTML and CSS. Also, you can inspect how the animation in variable font works with Java. And Jason shared some insights with me. He said, the chance to take a typeface with this kind of history and impact in the design and work with it in a context of brand new technology was very exciting for him. Then he said, I really appreciated being able to work with both weight and italic as part of the same file. It showcases the value of the variable font format very well, he wrote to me. I wanted to write a good introduction aimed at designers and brand owners in order to introduce them to the benefits of variable fonts in terms that would resonate with their concerns, design language, and brand expression. I think that he totally succeeded in this, and I hope you will enjoy this microsite as much as I do. This is where you can find our landing page. So, stay tuned, because all industry is working hard to provide you with beautiful variable fonts and new solutions for the emerging technologies. And even if you don't consider yourself a geek, I'd like to encourage you to go and play with those new technologies. Make projects with variable fonts, make variable fonts and share it with us. Because I really believe that technology, culture, and typography only improves when a lot of people are working together. Thank you.